Sometimes when I am deep in sleep, I am randomly jolted awake thinking of the metaverse. What a dumb idea that was. To anybody who was born yesterday, the metaverse is kind of like this idea of the future of humanity that takes place in a virtual world. Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of a company called Meta, and is a man who is probably a bunch of squirrels trapped in a latex human suit, tried to sell the world on living in the metaverse. It was a special metaverse that he made himself, so he could sell more of his Meta Quest VR headsets, or whatever they're called. The living world would completely buy into this and adapt to Mark's vision of the metaverse, where everybody goes to work, to their schools, to their third places, all in this corporate virtual world. VR enthusiasts talk about the metaverse in the same way that finance bros talked about NFTs, which is funny because NFTs were a huge part of the metaverse. But many people said that it was the first step into the world of tomorrow. The applications are limitless. What are you, crazy? You're gonna be a real dummy for not believing that this is going to be as big as the internet. For God's sake, they established the name of Facebook and Instagram's parent company as Meta. That's how invested they were in this idea, but if we are talking dollar signs, you could say that they were over $100 billion invested in the metaverse. So, how are you enjoying the metaverse? Are you living Zuckerberg's dream? Are you learning how to become a surgeon? You're obviously not watching this video in the metaverse. You're watching it on your phone or computer. Does anybody besides parents of toddlers use YouTube TV? If you do, then I don't trust you. Either way, the metaverse, or specifically the metaverse that Mark Zuckerberg envisioned, is not a thing. Meta has very clearly completely pivoted to artificial intelligence features and investments, as many tech companies have done as well. But something very interesting has caught my eye. A leaked memo from Meta's CTO. This company is still trying to make the metaverse work. They're still trying it. Those poor bastards. I just envision this like as a situation like in that war movie. Private got like 3 bullets in his gut, and as he's bleeding out, the commander's like, "We're gonna get you home. You're gonna see your wife and kids. Just close your eyes." I think the main reason why they want to make the metaverse work is so they can tie in their new mixed reality Ray-Bans into it somehow. Because you see people raving all over the world about how much they use their Apple Vision Pros. Let's take a look at that memo. 2025, the year of greatness. If you don't feel the weight of history on you, then you aren't paying attention. This year likely determines whether this entire effort will go down as the work of visionaries or a legendary misadventure. The classic, this is your fault if this fails. So the pressure is on. Reality Labs, Meta's virtual reality division, is working on mixed reality devices, which apparently they view pushing Horizon Worlds and making it work as detrimental to the company. Horizon Worlds is Meta's main metaverse project. The very same that got memed into oblivion, by the way. This memo gives us so much clarity. There are 2 roads that Meta will drive down. Either they will find a way to make the metaverse work, which could end up being further schemes to Frankenstein this cursed project with more money, or they will finally pull the plug and let the metaverse flatline. What do I think? I don't know. I'm just surprised that the lights are still on over at Meta. What the actual fuck is wrong with these people? I heard someone refer to the metaverse as a bubble, and that doesn't sit right with me. Don't call it a bubble. Calling it a bubble is giving this concept way too much power than it actually has. It's not good enough to be a bubble. Economic bubbles, when the value of a good service industry or concept is driven up due to irrational and flawed speculation. A miscalculation of something's intrinsic value. You might be saying, well, that's exactly what the metaverse is. The classification of a bubble relies on a fallout wrecking the economy in some way. Anything else is something that's not quite a bubble, but maybe bubble adjacent. Is AI a bubble? It's never a good sign when one single company failing would more than likely spell straight up recession. Like so many businesses and investments are reliant upon Nvidia, and all of this is held together by the promise that AI will be forever profitable. The promise that it will never hit a wall and will eventually be seen as something more than a homework machine or a, high-tech Google search engine. One that gets answers wrong all the time, by the way. we don't know what will happen with that definitively, but as the days move forward, there's less and less enthusiasm in the world of AI. How about history? Tulip mania is an example of a speculative bubble that is thrown around quite a lot. For about 3 years in the 17th century over in the then Dutch Republic, tulip bulbs were expensive as shit. Tulips can come in many varieties, and some of these bulbs were sold for like $1 million in today's money. But these bulbs had a certain splitting pattern that people thought was very pretty. It was a specific mosaic virus called the tulip breaking virus. And mind you, these tulips are perennial, meaning that they don't have a single bloom cycle. And people bought them to flaunt their status and wealth. It was like a fashion collectible, a living labubu, if you will. And there are very few records of people losing their entire fortunes due to tulip prices crashing. You also got to keep in mind that the Netherlands love flowers and tulips. It's a gigantic trade export for them and a huge part of their economy. Honestly, this was more of just a cultural obsession that many wealthy people participated in than anything else. The price dropped into a volcano because, come on, they're tulips. It didn't really have a critical influence on the Dutch economy at the time, and it wasn't seen as an investment for the everyday worker who was dumb enough to buy into it. It was more like Pokemon cards for incredibly wealthy merchants and craftsmen. From what I have read, modern historians view the initial categorization of tulip mania as sensationalist and reliant upon propaganda, an effort to make a group of people in history look like a bunch of dummies who crashed the economy over pretty flowers. And that's why I view tulip mania in the same fashion that I view NFTs, or non-fungible tokens. An NFT is an identifier on the blockchain that I guess can signify ownership and authenticity and thus be traded. People did this with shitty chimpanzee art. So people in the Dutch Republic spending the equivalent to $1 million on a tulip bulb, is that the same as the NFT craze? No, of course not. People spent $90 million on NFTs at their peak. And that's the thing. Did NFTs crash the economy? Not really. Just like how historians would argue that tulips weren't responsible for any critical blow to the Dutch economy at the time. The thing that these two things have in common is that they were both too stupid to be a true bubble in the traditional sense, all due to the deranged cultural glorification of something that is useless. Maybe not useless. Tulips are less useless than an NFT because at the end of the day, at least you have a tulip. But even then, I don't really go out of my way to correct people or really just blink twice when people call either of these things bubbles in casual conversation. But the metaverse, that's different. I do not call that a bubble. And it's different because somehow, against all odds, Mark Zuckerberg made something dumber than NFTs and $1 million tulips, and then went all in on it. If the metaverse truly was a bubble, then the only people who got the memo that it was a bubble were Zuckerberg himself, the people who will get fired if they try to talk Zuckerberg out of poor business decisions, and Zuckerberg's deranged followers. This freaky little ratatouille man, I say that both because he looks like Linguini and because he probably has some sort of critter controlling his body, was so delusional that he truly thought that the entire world would enthusiastically buy headache goggles and take college courses and clock into their work shifts via great value VR chat without legs. VR chat! VR chat already existed, and they had legs. I remember when Horizon Worlds got legs. It was a monumental occasion. That was like a mic drop moment for Meta. I always see these videos and articles that say the fall of Metaverse, which is confusing to me because I don't remember it having a golden age or a rise in general. A rise would imply that it was at one point successful. But from what I have seen, it started at one point and then it was just a steady trend downwards. Sure, maybe they had some users in their first year because they were dumping money into it and creating a meme spectacle that everyone wanted to dogpile them over. But what we're talking about here is a novelty, and novelties wear off. People still use Horizon Worlds, nothing against them. If you like that platform, use it. But this is a far cry from their elevator pitch of online virtual utopia. So much so that I feel like they are purposefully not reporting their dwindling numbers because they're embarrassed by them. So I'm not sure how they're going to turn this thing around because it generally seems like a hole that they've been dumping money into and a hole that isn't really helping them move VR headsets anymore. And that's not surprising. Just in case you forgot, Here's everything that's wrong with the metaverse. Because it is a failure that should stump no one. The average person does not care about VR. They are not going out of their way to make it a part of their life. A lot of people just view it as just a toy. The concept for a social VR world has been done time and time again. I mean, I already mentioned VR chat, but even beyond virtual stuff, you could argue that the metaverse has already been done with Second Life or Roblox. I mean, Roblox is way more of a metaverse than Mark Zuckerberg could cook up. And even without the nuance of needing to court pre-existing VR users or virtual world enthusiasts, it's just shitty technology that they seemingly refuse to acknowledge their competitors do better. It would be one thing if Meta dropped a Roblox killer and it had incredible graphics, no intense hardware was needed, it was a seamless and intuitive dream with a user interface and connectability that was revolutionary. But unsurprisingly, it did everything much worse and less intuitively than any other virtual world platform. It also seemed like this entire thing was viewed in the lens of short-term growth. There was no promise of this working. At no point did it seem like something worthwhile or special. It didn't try to fill any pre-existing need. It tried to be something new and shiny, but it did a really bad job at doing that. This is the kind of product that not even the creators use. Why would they? There are better services out there. And the marketing of this stinker was so bad. I mean, it took me a couple of years to realize that Horizon Worlds was their main project. I remember that they told me, but it's so dumb and confusing. Just call it Meta World or something like that. Listen, if the metaverse truly is the future, then I would expect game developers to go heavy on VR stuff. Work on that first. I'm sure that a lot of cool VR games are coming out, but I would expect these big-name developers to treat it more like a frontier rather than an afterthought. But it doesn't make sense to do that because as of right now, VR headsets are more like an addition to gaming instead of its own thing. I'm certainly not shit-talking VR here. I'm just saying this was so rushed. And it's kind of an indicator that not as many people as they thought care about VR, but I will say I commend their effort. I'd have a hard time giving this horrible idea up too, because, once you do, that's it. The failure's on your hands. I gotta say, if they turn this thing around and make this a gigantic turd, a success story, I would be impressed. Well, let's be real, that's not gonna happen. And if it does, it won't be Meta leading the front. This is the kind of thing that keeps Mark Zuckerberg awake at night, and at the very least, that's pretty funny. I don't got much else for today. I got a Patreon, perks and goodies over there. Have a wonderful day. Show me my patrons.